Hello, everyone. Welcome to Life Edge, and we are live streaming on Facebook, and we will soon be not so live, but archived on YouTube. And I'm thrilled today to have two really good friends and writing companions and inspirations, Valerie Fox and Lynn Levin. And they're here from Philadelphia and New Jersey, the two great places, and just so excited that they're here. So welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So it's so great. So I'm going to do a few little introductions, but they're going to be brief. But it's hard for me to be brief because I know you guys so well. But Valerie, we've known each other for so long. I think since the early '90s,
Yes,
and we were both writing avant-garde poetry, and you were studying, and then you graduated and moved to Japan, and just like such great work. And Lynn, I remember you from the very first time. I think you had done some work on, is it Mondo Barbie? Is it the name of the
well, Miss Plastique, maybe?
Maybe, yes, Miss Plastique. I don't know why I thought Mondo Barbie.
But well, it's a fashion doll that looks a little bit like a Barbie, but it's not really Barbie. You can see the poster behind my head there.
Okay, that's exactly, okay. So I remember you were doing a lot of things with cultural commentary, incorporating things, and just a lot of early just sort of kind of not, I wouldn't say feminist, but post-feminist, but almost like play with theory, and it was just so subversive. I just loved it. Anyway, so both of you are just two heroes for me. Anyway, so I'll start with you, Valerie. How did you get started writing?
Myself, my own poetry writing and fiction writing.
Yes.
I think as long as I can remember, it was something I like to do. And luckily, I lived in a home where it was valued. The arts were valued very much. And I think we didn't. I didn't have like a fancy education or anything like that. But my mom was an English teacher, and I just think she has this idea of art and literature, and so it was always valued in my home. So I guess I always was encouraged.
Oh, that's
I thought
wonderful.
about it a lot before I actually did it.
That makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So Lynn, how did you get started?
Well, I was lucky to go to a fairly progressive elementary school where they encouraged creative writing, encouraged poetry writing, especially when we were learning how to sound out words phonetically and rhyme things. And so one of the assignments they used to give us was rhyme with spring and swing and things like that, and see if you can come up with a poem. And I love doing that. And I was terrible at math and terrible at gym, but I was pretty good with the rhyming and the poetry. So I got encouragement, and encouragement helped me along the way. So that's my story.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, so I'm just curious about both of you. Like, how have you been able to think about process at the same time as the kind of the product? Because like Poems for the Writing is your collection that's done really well, and it's going into the second edition, and basically it's all about process. But why don't you describe a little bit about that sort of self-conscious awareness between process and product?
Well, I could jump in here because it is very, very much about process, and our prompts guide students. Many of them are structural prompts, and so they'll say we have intertextual prompts like Bibliomancy and swipe a line, find a title, things like this, if the faux translation. And the process will be, find a poem that in a language that you slightly know or don't know, and kind of invent what this poem is about. Or bibliomancy. Send students to someplace they rarely go, the library's reference section, and we ask them to go through dictionaries and encyclopedias and things like this and find a topic they're interested in, collect some quotes, collect some information from these various sources, and bring it together in a poem. So that's one way, among the many ways we're using process to help students put together a poem.
And Valerie, you've used process in a slightly different way, in other ways as well.
Yeah, for me, I'm very obsessed with process for my own writing, and I like the hands-on, almost making aspect of writing, and am interested in visual arts as well. So I think for poems for the writing, what I enjoy is sort of telling the students about that, how that physicality, that way you can make up your own process and follow it, and then in terms of the product, I think sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But there's that joy then of telling your story and sharing it with your audience. And whether it's a small audience, the class, or whether it's a big audience in a magazine or in a book or something like that. But I feel like for me, I'm so interested in the actual work itself, that's like the heart of it for me. And so the product, I think as I've gotten older, I've developed ways of thinking of the product and ways of getting it out there. But it took me a long time to get there.
Well, I remember in the first kind of process-focused work had to do with collaborations, and so that's almost like that. Yeah, talk to us about your collaborations.
Yeah, we collaborated. I remember. I'll never forget. You asked me to collaborate on some writing. It was great. And yeah, I love collaborating. I love interdisciplinary. The book, collaborating with Lynn has been fantastic. I just feel like we have so much to learn from each other. And when you collaborate, you learn about each other's obsessions and processes. Lately, it's been a real thrill. I've been collaborating with an artist I know named Jacqueline Niemiec, and she's an architect, but she's really a fine artist at heart. She's a real fine artist, an amazing artist, but we're very simpatico when it comes to our processes. So I just enjoy learning from her so much. So part of the great thing about collaboration is, of course, creating something you would not otherwise have created, but learning from each other. And so that then you sort of integrate, you synthesize that in with your own process.
I like that. And Lynn, a lot of your work has been informed by theory, and then you incorporate it and subvert it and then resubvert it. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Subverting things and,
the theory and how that has informed your work, like thinking even maybe beginning with Miss Plastique and some of the ideas behind that.
A lot of Miss Plastique, while I'm not as big of a theory head as some people, I'm delighted that people see theory in what I do. So some of this Miss Plastique stuff had to do with the travails of femininity and what it meant to be a woman, and have to concentrate on hair and makeup and high heels and things like that, and where that got you and why that sometimes wasn't so great. But so that's,
I like that.
I'm
also
more into the experience, and sometimes the subversion, absolutely, because there's a lot of humor in that. Dark humor is
yes.
something that I tend to like to do. So and there is quite a lot of room for humor in the new book too, as we have the poem of invective. People get to talk about what they hate. The poems, this is kind of I guess, literary theory, maybe this intertextuality, because we also have poems like the song title poem, where people are taking only the titles, not the lyrics, but the titles of songs that they love and weaving them into a poem. So that's a type of literary theory that we have in our new book.
Definitely, and I can see that, and even like Bakhtin and the dialogical imagination, where you have that you can't help, and also Derrida with the idea of just it drags in all those associations. So you are looking at the text itself and thinking of what that song was, but then everything else that comes with it, and then you can play along with it, or you can toy with people's expectations.
Yeah. I mean, the people who are doing that song title prompt weave in their life experiences and link them somehow to the song title. So it works out kind of nicely.
So, Valerie, what has been your most unusual experience with literary creation?
Unusual?
Yes.
Something that's so memorable that I still think about, I was just thinking about it, is that a few years ago, through a gentleman named Dennis Moritz, who's the spouse of Phyllis Watt, who's one of the 6 people, he told me about a theater activity where you would meet. It was called Fly by Night, I believe. And you would meet up with people. I think we met in a church or somewhere, and you would become part of a team. And every team had to have a writer, a director, and actors. And then you would have 24 hours to create a piece that would go on the next day. And I only did this once with this group, but it affected me pretty profoundly. And I think the reason I was thinking about it lately is because I was thinking about how, with us being online all the time, and I'm online a lot, I like to do stuff online, be in workshops and things like that. It's hard to force yourself to do something, to concentrate so much for a 24-hour, over a day or two. And so I was thinking about what I learned from it. But I was also, I guess this is also my love of collaboration. I also remember how kind of enchanting it was that these actors would take this sort of crazy like weird postmodern thing that I came up with and do their best with it to enact it. So that was a very influential, memorable for me. How about you? I'm curious about for you, Susan.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so, well, recently I decided that sometimes I can't find my old files, even though I try to put everything in flash drives and also in back it up in Google Drive or whatever. But then I forget what I call the archive, and and so and also I've kept journals for years and years. And I came across journals from, say, 20 years ago, and I thought, so I put them all together, and I thought, I'm going to leave these for posterity. But I don't think that, I'm not sure about the quality of them. It's just some sort of like time capsule thing, but not for the generation later, but maybe for the future generation. And so I bought a bunch of journals, and I've been practicing calligraphy, thinking that whomever I'm leaving them for won't be able to read them. And so I've just been thinking about that, and then thinking about how I used to write really well in journals, but I've been writing with like interrupted things, like, constantly surfing or curious about something, checking email, doing it just, chunks of things, which I can be productive. But in terms of like you're talking about a long, protracted time, I'm just not seeing it. So I started trying to write again. And then also sort of like deliberately generating motifs. So, for example, this last weekend, and this is again fresh for me, my dad is in intensive care last week and the week before, and he's out of intensive care, and he went back to rehabilitative thing, and he had some strokes. So his wheelchair got lost in the hospital. Well, Norman Hospital is large. So last Saturday, I thought, okay, I'm going to go find his wheelchair. It's like my brother goes, oh, come on. My sister said, good luck with that. But I found it, and it was thanks to 4 different groups of people that were all very, very nice. And so I started writing a thing about finding a wheelchair, and just how it starts layering and building meaning, and I haven't finished it, but I just was thinking about that, and it started out with some journal thoughts and recording stuff in a daily journal. So
That sounds great. That sounds like such a great piece. Those layers and the personal and the negotiating of the space. Finding
movement in the hallways.
Tough space to find your way around sometimes. Really hard.
Yeah, I know. So we went to like the progressive care, then down to intensive care, and then emergency room, and it's just a long hallway with in the end of the corner a bunch of wheelchairs. And it just so happened that had been on a Saturday, and this is a Saturday, so the people who are working on the weekends, the same people, they go, oh, I sort of remember seeing a stray wheelchair. Anyway.
I'm glad he's out of intensive care, and but I think this piece you're writing will be a nice, like people will relate to it, like losing something, finding it again. I'd love to see it.
Right. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so that's been my recent thing, and then lately also I've started. I don't know if it's because I'm afraid of my own feelings or what, but I sometimes feel like I'm a better writer of reviews or brief critical pieces, like analysis, than of creative things. I don't know. Have either of you gone through that kind of phase?
How about you, Lynn? I know you've tried a lot of different genres. You've written reviews, etc.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm actually doing a lot of fiction writing.
Nice.
I've pretty much, I think I've put one manuscript. I've composed one poetry manuscript that I've been working on, and I've been doing fiction a lot lately, and also I've gone back to poetry translation, which also is with me a collaborative process, since that was one of our themes. I would translate some of the poems and then send them to the poet I'm working with, and he'd say, this is what I meant, this is not what I meant. So that's very fruitful.
Nice.
I'm loving collaboration more and more and more. The partnership, the shared values, the mutual support. And it's just a joy to be able to create and work in that environment.
Oh, I totally agree. So, Valerie, when you were in Japan, did you find yourself feeling that you were having to maybe do a kind of translation, like a cultural translation, as well as like maybe a linguistic translation?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, in terms of my writing, to keep it going, I got to know a few expats there and got to know their writing, but I also got to know many Japanese writers and translators, and yeah, it definitely made me attuned to that different like registers of language more than I had been before. I also, it's such a great language, and the people I met tended to really, even the Japanese people who weren't totally fluent in English, they really had such a nice way of using English. So I got to know this way of being in between languages, and how interesting that could be, and how creative that could be to try to sort of make things up. That kind of in between.
I love that concept. Yeah, between languages. That's really interesting.
But that's probably because I was so poor at the actual. I'm not a good Japanese speaker in the slightest. I would take lessons, and I would not get very good. And everyone at work I worked with knew English totally fluently, so it was really hard for me to learn. My partner would always be the one who would like call up the landlord, and so unfortunately I didn't become as proficient as I wish I had. But maybe that made me more creative Like I got maybe better with sign language, using my hands and gestures and sounds. But that it was I think that people there were so friendly that it never felt uncomfortable. It was always fun to try to communicate with them.
Oh, that's cool. Well, so Lynn, so going back to the new version, the second edition, how was the second edition of Poems for the Writing different than the first edition?
Well, it contains 6 new prompts, and they're all very classroom tested, exciting prompts that excited the students. So these include prompts like the thank you poem, the song title poem, the superhero poem. Let's see, Valerie, which are some other?
I think besides the new prompts, we have more examples of many different prompts. So, for example, we have this one called Bibliomancy, which I ask people to sort of do research and cut and paste from texts. And most of the ones from the first edition were very fancy, and they were great. They are great, but Lynn has been teaching this prompt to undergraduate students, and she got one that's more relatable, I think, to people at all levels, so that they could enjoy this process of, cutting and pasting. Her name's Devin. What's Devin Williams? It's called Rats. And she wrote down a lot of facts about rats. It's an animal she likes a lot. And it's just a charming poem.
Like the rats that have a long tail and bald tail.
Yeah, but she honors the rats. Nice. She honors them. We also have poems like Encounter with an Admired Person, which is kind of it's in some ways a little off the wall in some ways, because the authors get to just imagine meeting Yoko Ono or a famous writer, and just Valerie's got a poem in there too about Encounter with an Admired Person. Very freewheeling, imaginary, usually joyful, and a little bit kooky in some ways, but honoring the kooky. Valerie, am I getting that right?
Yeah, no, that's a great explanation. And we also include a sort of a flash fiction short piece by Meg Pokras. I think with that chapter, we're helping people to lighten up a little and be, goofy or risque or just weird, because sometimes people they need that kind of push. They need that kind of push. So yeah, that's definitely different. We do have more short prose and prose poetry in this version too. Not necessarily in the new chapters, although that encounter, it is that new chapter, but just in general, because I just feel like that's very common right now for people to be writing a lot of short flash fiction and prose poetry. And there's a market for it. There's really a market for it. There's a lot of amazing magazines out there online and anthologies coming out. So we thought this would be important to feature also in the book. So I think, Lynn, we have maybe 20% of the work in there is probably on the page, sort of prose looking. And so that's different than last time.
Yeah, because that is really one of the major trends these days. It's hybrid genres, flash fiction, prose poetry, things like that.
So if somebody is, I'm sorry, I just wanted to add. So if a teacher wants to use this book and she or he's getting a lot of I know people who are other kinds of artists or fiction writers, these chapters will definitely, hopefully, bring them into. They won't be intimidated by them. Like, oh my gosh, a sonnet, Shakespeare. What can I? How can I do that? Iambic pentameter. They can think about the music of ordinary language in that same sense that they do as a fiction writer or dramatist or something like that. If that makes sense.
They're very friendly that way.
Yeah. Well, another thing too, I love the sense of play. And I was thinking the other day, I was reading Fernando Pessoa, and some of his ideas of writing, as he wrote from what he called heteronyms, but he just created these other personae to write from as though he were that other person. And then Yeats did that too. He would write as though he were just channeling some other spirit or person, and I think that you in the first edition encouraged a little bit of that too, just like writing from the perspective of a different person. But I didn't know if you've developed that even more in this one.
Well, we do still have the advice column poem. And so that definitely
Right.
is writing from the perspective of another person, some type of troubled soul who's also very funny, very witty, not afraid of sounding kooky. So, that might be kind of a Pessoa thing, thinking about the advice column poem.
I love that. And it doesn't have to be good advice. I like that too.
Yeah. No, and I think the maybe the fact that some of the assignments feel like fiction. Also, fiction assignments just makes some of the young poets or new poets try to use persona anyways, because I don't know why, but some people, maybe it's their training as children or something, but they get this feeling that poetry is nonfiction, which is crazy. But so we have the pleasure of disabusing them of that and getting them to try to create characters and create stories through voice. Like that's what I see like Meg Progressive work a lot, as she talks about this sometimes, how she's creating a story through voice. And there's more poetry out there than lyric poetry. There's narrative poetry, there's dramatic poetry, and so we try to encompass all of those in our classes for sure. I mean, that's one of the reasons Lynn and I like to collaborate. I think we have this lyrics, poems are wonderful, but I think that poetry is bigger than that. There's so many styles you can use nowadays, and it's confusing to new writers, because in a climate where anything goes, they think, oh, what can I do? So we try to sort of narrow it down for them by giving them these ideas.
And again, it's the focus on and the focus on process, because I think if anything in the culture, if they're going to see poetry, they're going to see it in the context of some kind of poetry slam or poetry this or that, poetry. I mean, I don't even know, but they will see it as performative rather than process. And this makes it different.
I agree with you that students today, they do go to poetry slams, they do go to spoken word. That's mostly poetry of the stage as opposed to poetry of the page. And we're doing more poetry of the page. But we do it in this supportive, fun way where sometimes there's some writing in class, or you could write at home and then bring it all to workshop. The book also lends itself very much to online teaching, because each of these chapters are very self-contained. It has the explanation of the prompt, and then it has usually 4 examples of the prompt, and they're very much examples that are in reach of the student writer. A great many of our of our sample poems are written by undergrads, and it's just amazing what they come up with. The prompts, I gotta say, they're kind of excellent. So they just give birth to these amazing poems. And some of them are funny, and some of them are really serious, and some of them are wildly imaginative and dreamlike. So the prompts are springboards for so many different kinds of creative thinking.
And it's a joy. I would add, it's just a joy to see the young people, but also, not just the young people, but the newer writers. It's a joy to see them, blossom in using these, because maybe I'm just, as I'm getting older, things can seem kind of gloomy out there sometimes, and so it's inspiring to see the young people and their creativity. It gives you a little hope for the future of people, humans, because they're so creative. And I mean, people here, you can say, well, they don't know this, they don't know that, or we don't have this anymore, we don't have that, but they have something else. I mean, I'm just amazed at what they come up with.
That's really wonderful. Yeah. So, what's the next step?
Well, the next step is, now that the physical book is out, just want to show that one more time there. We're so proud of it. It looks so pretty, too. And
it's
Susan, we can't thank you enough for your support, and Arlene Ong, great design. we're so grateful to you both. Really, now that we have the physical product and all the new prompts are there and the new samples, letting people see how it works. We're so eager to have teachers use it as a teacher book for a creative writing class, or maybe if they get stuck one day and they need to liven up class, or to assign to students as a textbook. We're just so excited to see how people are going to use the book and what is going to come of it in terms of student creativity. I mean, that's one of the things that's next. Valerie, like, you want to jump in there? And
I think I'm also eager to share it in different contexts. I really enjoy teaching it in the undergraduate context, but I'm looking forward to trying it out in online settings. And Lynn, you have a lot of good contacts with community groups and libraries, and so I'm looking forward to using it because it's always much fun too. So I'd say that's our next step. Yeah, I feel it's a good book, having a good book for people to have in their local library. Like, I think it would be a good book for people to just happen upon and pick up and be able to use. So I think it says, as authors, we have to put a little thought into that, making sure it gets out into the libraries and so on, because I think it's a very, very valuable resource for a wide variety of readers.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, well, we're definitely going to put in the notes how to order it and how to get in touch with each of you. And I think that what I'd like to see is maybe even have it used in libraries for, say, evening workshops. So just like even a one evening workshop. So it could be used for an entire semester course or an 8-week course, but even just short encounters.
Yeah, for sure. Don't you think, Lynn? I think it would work for one session for sure.
Yeah, one session. Because libraries programming is like the biggest thing for libraries these days, having events. And this could very well attract some with a low level of commitment. It's not like a whole semester course, or it's not even like a month-long course, but come and try your hand at writing poetry. See how much fun it is. Great idea.
Exactly. Yeah, and having sort of, I mean, like you said, a lot of things are focused around events anymore, and that's what I'm seeing in almost anything, that people are as much as they can communicate online, they're kind of starved for human contact, and so this is just a perfect framework for it. And they could do it in conjunction with something else too, maybe a corporate retreat, and use it for.
Oh my gosh, fabulous idea! Unusual ways to boost your creativity for people in technical fields or something like that. That is
right.
Fabulous and so much fun, and a lot of sharing and collaboration in a setting like that.
Yeah, I think I'll try that for. Actually, I'll get the books, and I'll do it around some geologists and see what we can come up with.
Yes. Let's see. Would they write the song title poem with all kinds of rock metaphors?
There's no telling. There's really no telling.
Yeah.
No, I love that idea. I mean, I also think we should try to have some teacher trainings too, because everyone might not be able to. Not every college teacher can assign a bunch of books these days, and if we could get it in the hands of the teachers, they can use it as a teacher resource. We hope too. So I think Lynn and we should definitely try some teacher trainings. We could be entrepreneurial maybe, and find a place maybe at one of our schools or something, and get them in there, have them try it out, and then of course they try it out themselves first and say, oh, this is good, this works. So let's try it.
I definitely think that a teacher resource is one of the prime uses for this book.
Absolutely, yeah. And so you may not be able to require every student to have a copy. It doesn't really matter. But if you could have 4 of the teachers in the school who could use it, and then even put it into the curriculum.
Yeah, or it could be in the school library. I mean, we have to admit that lots of students don't don't buy like 6 books to go with a semester long class anymore. They just don't do it anyways. So why not do what we can to get them to actually read it? You know, be practical. Be practical.
I think I'm going to write something though about how to use. This is, I'm kind of intrigued how to use it in a corporate retreat. I'm going to one next week. And it's called Energy Disruptors. And so I might think about, because it's all about, everybody's talking about how we have to be creative and come up with new products and things. And I don't think it works just to be creative thinking, oh, okay, artificial intelligence, machine learning, okay, let's be creative, and then not, and there's nothing to trigger it, nothing to actually have people think a different way.
Well, maybe if they're scientific, they might like one of our scientific poems, like the Fibonacci poem that uses the natural mathematical system to build a poem by syllables or by different ways of using numbers and counting to construct a poem using that Fibonacci sequence. They might like that.
Oh, that's great. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I would recommend if you can get them to use their hands or other things, you know, they're probably very spatially oriented people. If you could get them to do that, maybe by having, you know, cards, you know, using cards, things on like 3 different tables, you know, and the assignment might be to try to combine them somehow in some fashion. They might enjoy that too. It also gets the blood flowing, you know, to walk around, and that we've been hearing a lot about how that makes people creative to take their walks, you know, and to get up, and so that maybe physically get to move around.
That's a good idea. Well, I think some of them are going fly fishing. Maybe they could think about it while they're fly fishing.
Emotionally connect with things. I mean, that's what we do all the time in our like creative writing classes, and maybe in science, I mean, you not forget, of course you don't forget, but you maybe just never have the time to talk about those kinds of things. But if you could get them to emotionally connect with the words, I think that might make an impact on them. Just remind them that when they make that emotional connection, they're more creative and focused and this kind of thing. I don't know if now I'm just babbling, but I'm just based on like,
absolutely.
We teach a lot of students who are physics students and this kind of thing, and I see them. I don't know. I just see them thriving when they do poetry, and sometimes they definitely like the numbers and like Lynn was mentioning. But I think like everybody else, it's just that kind of emotional connection. If you can somehow give them some avenue into talking about themselves and expressing themselves, then they will thrive. So maybe your geologist can do that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I hear the cues music indicating that our time is up. So I just want to remind our viewers that we've been in a wonderful conversation with Valerie Fox and Lynn Levin, and that we're going to have a wonderful update in poems. So hold up the book again, poems for the writing prompts for poets. And that is going to be in the 2nd edition, and we'll have information about how to contact Valerie and also Lynn, and also how to obtain the book. So thank you both for being on Life Edge, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much, Susan. You're welcome.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Like and save.